that may be what it ends up, but who can say? So thank you so much, everyone, for joining this evening for our Food for Thought Fridays. We'll share some thoughts and then we'll get some food. Today we're discussing who can say. So I want to start with a question, as these kinds of things tend to. What's the best thing that happened to you this week? Anyone care to share? And that's to inspire some. No, it did not happen for me either, but.
I had ice cream yesterday.
Okay, we have ice cream. Oh. Okay, we've got ice cream. Who can top that? What was the best thing that happened to you this week? Ticket to. You learned how to bake a cake?
Yeah.
Okay, so hold on. There's some good vibes here. All right, ticket dismissed. That was also good for me.
Oh, best thing. Okay.
Learned to bake a cake. What else? Yes.
Coming here today has been such a long pandemic.
Oh. Well, wait for the end, and then we'll see if you still feel that way.
And coincidentally, I was watching this series today, and this was the question that came up.
Really?
Turn the person next to you and actually genuinely form a connection by asking this question and truly learning what that is. And I'm like, the moment you turn on the slide, I'm like,
Whoa.
whoa.
Okay. Okay, also coming to VBS. And for those of you joining remote, it's better in person. Anyone else want to share? So you kind of alluded to the follow-up, which is, for those of you brave enough to share the best thing that happened to you this week, why did that make it to the top of your list?
It made them happy.
Okay. So happiness, it gave happiness. Satisfaction, I think, is another word I heard. Okay. Relief? Okay.
I agree. Relief.
Okay.
Live for another month. I hit my sales number and all that.
All right. Okay. Hit your.
I'm employed for one more month.
Okay. So that's relief, or
Yeah.
okay. Oh, today's the last day of the month.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So there's an interesting spectrum of words here, ranging from like the kind of buoyant exclamation mark to the kind of mellow peace to the relief, which is implicit of, I'm happy something bad didn't happen. So we've got a whole spectrum of why these things, and I'm sure many more that are at the top of your minds, made it as the best thing that happened this week. Now, I'm going to ask you to meditate on, because it could get very personal and uncomfortable. So think about the worst thing that you heard about that might have happened to somebody else this week.
Might have happened.
I don't know. Who can say? Huh?
So many questions in the mind for the future.
Okay, so that was the worst thing that happens to somebody this week. Somebody that you know, or yourself, or however it might be. Okay. So overthinking. Maybe somebody we know had a medical emergency. Maybe somebody was dealing with unrealistic expectations. Layoff. Okay. Okay. So there's the range of the worst could be very, very, very large. But this was just to get an idea of the dynamism of this experience that we call life. There's the small highs or big highs, and then there are the small or the big lows that we experience, right? So what determines if something falls in that category of good or bad? Who could say? What do you think? Okay. I'll put the difference.
Maybe good, maybe bad.
Maybe good, maybe bad.
Culture or the cultural background.
Okay, so could you, well, let's go back to perspective. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit? Like why you said perspective? No? Okay. All right. All right, culture. We'll get back to perspective then. Culture, you said? Okay. What about culture?
Like if we're raised in a certain culture, then if everyone's, perceiving something as good, then we automatically follow that, that upbringing, because everyone around us believes this is right or this is wrong, this is good or this is bad. So naturally we also, get that. But on a broader scale of it, not necessarily.
Yeah, there's lots of examples to that point of culture. So how many of us have ever been sprayed by cow urine? In certain culture, like in a certain cultural understanding or perspective of a cow is purifying. It's a good thing. But in a different cultural paradigm, it's something to be avoided. Or, we, as part of this spiritual process, we eat vegetarian food that's first offered to Krishna. So we consider that good. But somebody with a different cultural understanding could say, if it's not meat, it's not a real party. Like that. So that's a really nice point that you brought up. What else might influence our understanding of what is good and what is not good? What is bad?
How does it make you feel?
Okay, how it makes me feel?
To add a point of perspective, for someone, a good thing for someone might be good, and for someone else it might be bad.
Okay, so kind of elaborating on perspective, you're highlighting the relativity of it.
Yeah, because if someone gets laid off, it's bad for them, but the company is saving money, so it might be good.
Okay.
Which side are you on, bro?
Yeah. True. And it could even be, let's say somebody got the job. That means hundreds of other people didn't get the job. So we could extrapolate from that the act of getting the job, is it good? Is it bad? It depends on that perspective, the relative positioning of the viewer of that event. Anything else?
After effect. Maybe we want that to happen again or not.
Okay, the aftermath. Now that you're bringing up a really interesting point, because we've until now been talking only about whether something is good or bad in that moment. But now you're introducing the idea of our perspective of that situation could change. I think that's where you were.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. How many of us agree with that? Maybe similar show of hands. How many of us have ever had an experience that we saw as good and it later changed to bad? And the other way, something we'll say, you beat me to it. Bad, realized it was good. Does anyone feel comfortable, and it's okay if the answer is no, sharing an example of something that seemed good but turned out to not be so pleasant?
Junk food.
Ooh. Nice. Okay, other side. Something that you perceived as bad that later turned out to be good.
26-year-old, I always thought like eating non-veg is very essential for the life. Like chicken, fish, whatever. And I thought like that's the best I can have. Like protein and all. Then last 1.5 years, I left it completely. But I feel things become different for me in perspective of health, life, my mindset. So I was actually around for 26 years as like private society where I grew up, like everyone is sitting down there and they thought it's good. So I was in a coastal area of India. So that was the different perspective I had. But since I left it, it's been 1.5 years. I see a lot of things changing, at least on a physical level. It's good, not bad.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Are there other examples, something that we might have seen as bad that became seen as good later on? School. Yes, that's a great example.
Would you rather go to school or play video games as a kid?
Yeah.
Oh,
All right. So there's
I was gonna say, so like if you chose like a computer science degree, but you didn't get hired after it, was pursuing the degree worth it?
seems
Because
like
the
a good
market is saturated.
seemed like a good idea. Promised something and then it didn't live up to that
It didn't
promise.
meet expectations.
Yeah. Okay, so the determination then of whether something is good or bad, like there's aftermath, there's how I feel about it, there's culture, there's perspective. Now there's a story that I really liked, that just really illustrating this idea of perspective and relativity, which is why I didn't elaborate on it right away. So there's a story of a person who wanted to sell his house, and it was a very beautiful house. Past tense was. And that morning, he had entered a verbal agreement with somebody to buy the house for a very good price. And later that day, the house erupted in flames. Terrible accident. And so the owner was very distressed. Well, first he was happy that his house sold. Then when he learned about the fire, he was very distressed, like, oh no, my house is on fire, my house is on fire. And the contract hasn't even been signed yet. So he was very anxious. He was going to lose all this money and lose his house. And then one of his children came running and said, no. The person who bought it said an agreement is an agreement. He's a man of his word. And so he'll still buy the house. And so this now former owner of the house just stands with the crowd and watches the house erupt in flames. The house still burned, but what changed? His perspective. Not just his perspective. Well, yeah, there's outcome, there's perspective, and underneath that perspective, what was driving that I'm going to lose this, and then suddenly just let me get the marshmallows and make myself a s'more.
Selfish interest.
Okay, yeah.
Here, outcome is still the same.
Well, not.
Maybe. Like
He's going to get the money.
His personal attachment to it. He thought he might not get the money, but then when he thought, I'm gonna get it anyways, let it be gone. It's not mine.
Yes. So what seemed like, I mean, this is kind of a caricature example of the fluctuations between good, house sold, bad, house on fire, good, I still get the money. It was driven by his identification, his personal attachment to it. Exactly. So when we also think about things from a good and bad lens, a perspective, we're starting to get to a place where I think we can agree it's not the situation itself that can be inherently good or bad. It's what is my perspective, what is my attachment to that particular situation, the attachment to the outcomes of that situation. Because you might see situations happen, either setbacks or things that many people would argue are favorable. Same thing happens to two different people, they respond in two very different ways. Make sense? So this takes us to the other story of the Chinese farmer. Who can say? This was the basis of the title.
He wasn't there that day.
Oh no, what happens?
Yeah,
they told
I
us.
said, I did this.
Yeah.
Do you want to guest narrate it?
No, go.
All right. So
I thought it was going that way, right? Yeah.
yes. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. It's
So so there was a farmer, and he had a horse, and it was a very strong horse that he relied on to plow his fields. And then one day the horse ran away, and everybody said, "Oh, that's so bad." Good fortune, bad fortune, who can say? And then a week later, the horse came back, but not alone. It came with a lot of other horses because it encountered wild horses and became the leader, and they all came back, I guess. And then everyone said, "Wow, you're going to be such a wealthy person because you have so many horses. You're so fortunate." Good fortune, bad fortune, who can say? While breaking in the wild horses, his son got thrown off the horse, broke his leg, and was incapacitated for the season. Oh, that's so sad. Good fortune, bad fortune, who can say? Then a representative of the king came to conscript all of the eligible aged men to fight in battle. But then they said, "Oh, this man, he's injured. I can't take him with us. So you just stay here." Wow, you still have your son. You're so fortunate. Who can say?
okay. Maybe good, maybe bad.
So, a few things we can take from this. But before going there, any reflections on that story?
Only time.
Only time. What about time, though?
What about time?
Only time can
It was good or bad.
Only time can tell if it's good or bad. But good or bad from what perspective? So perspective isn't just mine versus somebody else's. It's also how high up are we looking at the situation? If we look at that story in isolation, child broke leg, bad. Didn't fight in war, good. Got lots of horses, great. If we just look at things like that, we miss the larger picture of what's happening. And so part of this process of aligning ourselves to a more spiritually centric life, when we talk about study Bhagavad Gita and so on, is taking us out of the highs and lows, the minutia of everyday life. I ate ice cream last week, or I made a big important decision in my life, or I encountered a serious setback. When we look at these events in isolation, it can seem like the greatest thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. But there's a larger energy at hand. So there's the term karma. Familiar to everybody here? Guessing? Yeah. So the law of karma talks about how we can live our life with just desserts. And I was waiting for an opportunity to use that phrase, because living our life with just desserts, like, that sounds great. But just meaning justice, and desserts, what we deserve. So if somebody is meant to accumulate a lot of wealth, if somebody is meant to get that great job, if somebody is karmically meant to succeed as a student, it's coming. It's just a matter of time. Now, there's, of course, the effort component, but this is merely like all of the highs and lows in our life. When we're just going through our life, we're just receiving the rewards or the, let's say, adverse effects of past actions. And what we can do about it is, in the present moment, choose how we respond to it. Do we want to react, meaning just take what's immediately coming and look at that event in isolation and choose what to do next? Or do we want to see a higher picture? I'm going through an adverse situation. Let me reflect on previous adverse situations and how it might have benefited me to make me the person I am. So we can look at our collective life experiences as the perfect situation for where we are and the perfect ingredients for where we want to be, if we're looking at it from a spiritual perspective. And so I'll transition to that line of thinking with palmistry. So there's a story that was told in memory of Srila Prabhupada, as founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And somebody went up to him and said, do you read palms? And he said, and so he grabbed the man's hand and he looked very carefully at the hand and said, in a concerned expression, oh, very bad, very bad. And this person whose palms being was like, like, what's going on here? Said, yes, all bad, very bad. Birth, death, old age, and disease. I love that story. Because if we look at this from a spiritual perspective, anything that is not helping us move in that direction of transcending, being thrown about by these laws of material nature, is ultimately bad. So we may hear stories or may have engaged in things where, oh, let me do this good thing because I know something good will come back to me in the future, right? We've all been there. Or there's the little guilt factor of, oh, I did something that maybe wasn't the best and it's going to come back to bite me. So that's there. That's always going to be there as long as we are identifying with this material world around us. But, and this is where Krishna speaks in the 4th chapter in Bhagavad Gita, he who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. And then there's a few more verses which kind of continues that thought. Oh, yeah, it's not a minute. And talks about the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So our transition from a transactional, short-term, immediate moment worldview, looking at everything in relation to what do I experience as pleasure? What do I experience as pain? Starting to move away from that and seeing these things for what they are. Their rewards or unpleasant experiences or circumstances from my past misdeeds or positive or favorable deeds. But that only affects the body. And if we go through the exercise of, what is this? My hand, right? My elbow, my head, but where am I? So the soul is not the body. And so if I'm saying that all these pleasures, all these pains are in relation to the body and the mind, which is a subtle extension of this physical body, then what's really hurting me? What's really touching me? What's really giving me happiness? That's one of the beauties that I found just in this, like in just reading and hearing about the Bhagavad Gita, just this emphasis that there is a difference between the soul and the body, because if we really consider, nothing can touch us. All these setbacks and challenges and maybe moments or whole long periods of happiness, nothing can touch us as the soul. And so how are we acting in relation to that true identity? So where this is going is, it's not so much a matter of what is good and bad, because we've established that it's a very relative designation on something. That thing is not inherently good, and that thing is not inherently bad. Because related to our perspective, it's strongly tied to what is my set of values that drives what is good, what is not good, what is pleasurable or what is painful, what is something I gravitate toward and something I pull away from. As spiritualists, we're looking more toward the direction of favorable and unfavorable. So beyond what is immediately exciting. Now, in terms of favorable and unfavorable, there are 6 principles that are given in the Nectar of Instruction. It was a book that was compiled, or a series of verses compiled by one of the teachers in our line, Rupa Goswami. And he recommends that 6 things that are favorable if we are orienting toward the spiritual trajectory are being enthusiastic. And enthusiasm doesn't just mean like, yeah, kind of a thing. It means effort applied with intelligence. Conscious, thoughtful steps forward. Endeavoring with confidence. And these are all kind of tied together. So I'll also lump the patient part. Because the real test of confidence, it's easy to feel confident when you see an immediate result or immediate reward, right? But what happens when that reward is delayed? Or it's perhaps subtle? It might be easy to lose heart, to not move forward with confidence. And so that's where the quality of patience becomes so important to aligning our lives with this worldview of favorable, that which cultivates my eternal relationship with Krishna, with the Supreme. That it will happen, it's just a matter of time. And that in that meantime, these things, both pleasant and unpleasant experiences, I'll continue to have. It's part of the package, it's part of this life. But as Krishna was advising us before, we don't have to identify with that. It doesn't mean that we turn to stone and we like, congratulations, you won $1 trillion. Nice. Or congratulations. I don't even want to say something unfavorable, but it's not that we're devoid of emotion. It's understanding that these events are transient, and they're, when properly utilized in a favorable way, become additional tools in our toolkit to realizing our relationship with Krishna, to reestablishing ourselves as spiritually centered entities. And then there are also the guiding principles of Shravanam Kirtanam, so hearing, chanting, remembering, and the other areas that we've heard about in the past. Chanting, so that was in relation to the exercise we did last week, which is really nice. And then abandoning the association of non-devotees, that doesn't mean cut ourselves off, it just means we carefully choose who we reveal our hearts and minds to and who we receive advice in confidence from.
How would you contribute in that point? Would you have compassion? How would compassion fit with this point?
So compassion is entirely possible, and that's part of it. Let's say Gopal goes up to you and says, stick your hand in fire. Would you do that? Right, but it doesn't mean you're being mean to him. You're just not going to accept what he's saying because you know something different to be true and know that's not good for you. Does that?
Like you have certain knowledge which you know is favorable. You want to share that knowledge, but with someone who doesn't have that knowledge. And how would that work with this point?
It depends on the relationship. So what compassion looks like in that sense of, let's say, extending ourselves or sharing transcendental knowledge, it depends on the person. For myself, if somebody came up to me speaking philosophy day one, I would just check out and never speak to that person again. That's me. Other people might be very inclined and want to talk about this and sincerely inquire. I've shared this very openly that I first came to VBS probably for the first year for the food. I didn't even come for the classes. Yeah, exactly. It was good food. But that doesn't mean that's the end of the road. Or we also have to endeavor with confidence and be patient that the process will work itself, because spirit is always superior to matter. And it doesn't mean that extending ourselves in a compassionate way means I need to be the one to see some kind of whatever. It's just, this is something nice, let me share it according to that person's disposition, their interest.
That's a very satisfying answer.
Okay. There's, and so in that way, we're also following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. So this is not a made up process. This is something that we've inherited, that we're continuing that tradition. So perfect tie into what you were talking about. There's a story that I really liked as well. Well, two stories. One of them is, it describes the nature of these, let's say, when we're on the spiritualist journey, how we can see apparent setbacks. So Radha and Krishna were on the swing. It's one of my favorite stories. And Srimati Radharani, she was starting to get a little nervous because Krishna was in a playful mood, so he started swinging higher. And Radha started getting scared. Like, Krishna, I don't want you to swing me so high. Like, slow down, slow down. And then she got a little closer to Krishna and was holding. And what did Krishna do? Who wants to take a guess?
Swing higher.
He started swinging higher. And so Radha got even closer. And so it was a very sweet exchange between the two of them. Well, what can we take from that?
Adversity may not necessarily mean that you're abandoned.
Maybe adversity.
Yeah, adversity means you're not doesn't mean you're being abandoned. It could be a way of bringing you closer to Krishna. How many of us believe that? Some, yes, some no.
We had a talk last year with VBS. It was called Opportunity in Adversity.
Ah, yeah.
I think Mohit Prabhu gave that.
Yes. There's always the opportunity, because we have that free will we can exercise. Do we want to take this adversity or this more pleasant experience and get distracted by it? Or do we use it as an opportunity to strengthen ourselves, strengthen our relationship with Krishna? So related to that, I found it funny and also very eye-opening and memorable to this day. But years ago, my best friend and I had a business. And toward the end, it was clear the business wasn't going to quite work out the way we thought it would. And my mentor, he very directly, I'm not sure what the mood was, but I'm so glad he said it. He just looked at me straight in the face and said, "Krishna doesn't care about your business." And at first I was like, whoa. But then he followed it up with, "He just wants you back." So, whatever it takes. He just wants us. He just wants our hearts. He just wants a relationship again. And that's so incredible to think about, because there's, I don't know how many of us are here in this classroom and how many millions of bacteria in this room as well, and whatever else, but Krishna has a unique relationship with each of us, and even the bacteria too. Just time. So, in a way, the answer to who can say, we can say that for ourselves by focusing on these 6 principles. So, under the guidance of the teachers before us, we have a chance. So I want to pause there if there were any other items of discussion. Otherwise, we'll transition to the Kirtan, which I'm very much excited about. Well, thank you very much.